Thank you for calling Death Before Desk Job. If you are this week's guest, please leave a message and Paul will call you back once he finishes the intro.
This is John Carbone, wishing you furious hope.
Hi, this is Paul, and you are listening to Death Before Desk Job, the podcast geared towards people who are pursuing, or who want to be pursuing, their creative endeavors to their heart's content. And just a heads up, if you hear more background noise than you did in the last episode, I'm recording this in the middle of the afternoon this time. Last time I did it in the middle of the night, but I realize it's going to be impossible to do every episode at that time and have a normal day the next day. So until I get a proper sound booth set up, you just have to deal with some birds and traffic. I'm very excited to be talking to one of my best friends in the whole world today. I think he encapsulates a stick-to-itiveness that I rarely see in people. You probably know him as the singer from the band Moontooth, but I know him to be much more than just that. I affectionately call him John Boy or Wang Kabang. My very dear friend John Carbone will be on a call with me today, and we will go into the things that him and I have done together, as well as the things that he's done on his own, what he's learned, all that. But before I get to that, I think it's worth noting that John is one of the only people that I brought the name of this show up to before it became a thing. I trust his opinion. In the beginning of the last episode, I gave a whole explanation that it's not a problem just having a desk job, but rather it's a problem taking a desk job instead of pursuing the things you love out of fear. And that was part of my introduction because of a suggestion from John. He said to me, well, I love that, but I think you might alienate some people who actually work at a desk, and I'm not trying to alienate anyone. So I gave that little preface. So while we're talking about the name, it does have interesting origins, and since this show is about process, I thought I'd take a few minutes and just kind of give you a little bit of insight into how this show got its name. Because there was an aha moment, but that was only after I followed through my process. I knew that I wanted to make this podcast and cover motivations, inspirations, and influences. And so I thought about calling it the swipe files. It's an advertising term. You collect clippings of images and text for a campaign that you're working on. They call that a swipe file. But it turns out that there's a podcast that uses swipe files in its name. And that led me to see that the term swipe was being used in the e-commerce world a lot. I mean, I want to get into how creatives make money, but I don't want this to be some sort of show where it's all about conversions and funnels and everything else. So I bailed. Plus, if I isolate the name or the word swipe, it just sounds like it's a show about Tinder nightmares, but I really don't want to get into that on a weekly basis. So we moved away from that name and I hit the thesaurus. I started going through synonyms for swipe, searching for terms on Google. What is the word for X? One term I stumbled onto was pastiches. For the definition, it's an artistic work in a style that imitates that of another work, artist, or period. It turns out that's already a show, but it really only focuses on the influences element. And it also sort of sounds like a celebrity rehab facility to me, so I go back to my book. I wrote down a bunch of names. I wrote down creative heist, probably because heist came up as a synonym, and I just like the word heist. But it doesn't really make sense for the show. And there is no episode of this show that I could ever make that would live up to a name like that. That I would listen to that show. Let's see. I wrote down great artists steal. Literally stealing a quote. And go figure, it exists already. But I do think that also narrows the conversation too much, although I like the concept. I wrote down paste up. Sounds cool. It's not super descript, and it leans very heavily on the visual arts. Those of you who are not visual artists and don't know the term, think street art. It's when someone takes a print and slaps it on a wall. So it's not really broad enough, and it doesn't really cover it. But we're kind of on a trail here. We have parameters. We're close. So I know that it can't be super specific to one occupation. It needs to be broad. So I need to find the thing that anyone in my ideal target audience would be united on. What are they for? What are they against? And by doing that, I did hit my aha moment. I had designed a t-shirt that said "Death Before Desk Job." The file was sitting on my desktop because I had come up with it a few weeks before. I remembered it right here because I remember that moment of frustration, feeling stuck. And that feeling resonated with me, and I know that that feeling resonates with a lot of creative people. So there's the idea. I think it talks about work. I think it talks about all of the things this show is set to talk about, and I think the name fits for that reason. The reason I'm telling you all of this is because there is a process, and I'm going to try to boil it down. So let's start. You take your initial idea, run with it for a second, right? And then put on the mask of the critic. A good way to do this, I've found, is let's say you take this idea that you think is really cool, and now you picture that idea coming out of the mouth of somebody that you think is a hack. I think we all have a person or people in our lives that we think are kind of cornball, let's be honest. We have this person that we know that whenever they do something or say something, it's a little cringy, you know? So if you can imagine that person saying it and not cringing at it, then you might be onto something. We're unable to be critical of ourselves a lot, so it helps to picture it coming from somebody else. I think when it comes to our own criticism, we're immune to good advice sometimes, and I don't think that we have bad ideas sometimes, but of course we do. We're human beings. So that's one, really. Be self-critical, right? Tear your own ideas apart. Because if you can't be honest with yourself, you're doing yourself a disservice. So here's two. I'll say do something with that criticism, right? Go down the rabbit hole a little bit. In my case, it was going to the thesaurus, wish I could say that word cleanly. Find similar things, break them apart, explore them more. It's one thing to just Google what's the word for this and then use that in this example. But, when you look for an answer for something, you can get just the answer or you can explore the topic. When you're Googling something, there's your answer and probably 10 other doors that you can open at least to keep exploring the realm. And that door that you pick could go to 20 more doors and 40 more. And you can keep going down the rabbit hole. You're going to find interesting things because there's just so much out there. So getting lost is my second piece of advice in the process. And lastly, I would say find somebody in your life who's a good barometer for taste and somebody who's going to be honest with you. You will obviously make the final call and you're going to do what you want to do, but it does not hurt to show your work to somebody that you trust and get an opinion. Ask yourself, am I communicating the point? Is this effective in selling my message? Am I just stroking my own ego and being self-indulgent here? In my case, having to present the show to the public, I needed to make sure that somebody who doesn't know who I am and doesn't know what I'm up to would see the name and know what my general message is. So that's it. Let's not waste any more time and get right into it. This is my conversation with my very dear friend, the incredibly talented John Carbone. John, it's amazing and strange to talk to you on mic. This is...
Shut the fuck up.
Oh,
Shut up.
Great start. What do you want?
All right, let me do this.
Oh man, seriously, it's exciting.
It's the first one that you did was really cool. I was telling you off mic about that, but it was cool to like. I even learned a couple things about you that were really impressive, and it's really useful for anybody that's struggling as an artist of any kind. I think they all understand like you just got to find those things that like, all right, I need to watch like a behind the scenes making of the album or documentary or something like that, of just like I need to see the others doing their thing to just remind myself I'm not alone. So this is a really cool thing that you're doing. I'm proud to be a part of it. Thank you for having me.
Oh, the pleasure's all over here, man. It is weird that there is anything about me that you don't know. Just for context for anybody who's listening, I mean, I've known John since we were 13 years old, maybe. You might have been 12.
I barely had any hair on my body at the time.
And that's saying something.
Now I have a lot of hair on my body. Yeah.
I think it grew when you first saw me. I think it just like splop, like it kind of popped out.
I just turned into a carpet as soon as I laid eyes on you.
Well, that's saying something, I think. So, yeah, I mean, to kind of cover that, I mean, so having known you for as long as I have, it's been really weird and interesting to see you become the, dare I say, Goliath that you are, because, you know, I remember a very, you were infectiously funny, but you were also in some ways very meek, at that age. And, I know that we have gone through like our share of tribulations as people together, but something happened somewhere. I think that for you went from being shy, you know, and maybe you could talk about like one of our, you know, our early bands, like middle school bands, versus, you know, where you've come to now, where you front this band and you are known for your on-stage energy and antics. Like, where does that motivation come from after all this time?
You know, it's really fascinating. So I'll talk about our first show together, for the people that don't know the story. But that was going back to, what would you say? It was like 2003?
2003, and I don't tell anybody this story, so this is all new.
This was a band we played in at the time called Vox Populi. That was your idea, wasn't it? Vox Populi?
Yeah, that was a dictionary search, I believe.
Should I say the other band name? That's one of my favorite band names that has ever been made that you came up with.
Oh, one of my favorite band names?
Yeah, you know the one I'm talking about? I don't want to say it in case you want to keep it in the banks, but I've told you that this is one of my favorite band names.
Well, if anything, I'll just change my current band name. I'm not using it, so whatever. What do you got? What was your favorite?
Do you remember You?
Oh, how can I forget?
Yeah, spelled EU, like
the European Union? yeah, it was just
like euphemism, euphoria.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was the coolest shit ever.
Yeah, it was
copyright.
Okay, well, before we get too into the aggrandizement, thank you, but the reason that doesn't work is the same reason that Bono from U2 is such a jerk move, because, you know, you're saying you're good. I don't know. Bono is good. That's
yeah.
So
I guess so.
So I guess there was sort of like
thought of it that way.
There was sort of a pomposity about it that I didn't like. So I stopped using it.
I always thought of it as like, you know, just feeling good and good things that came from the music.
Well,
which is interesting because I was incredibly cocky back then.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I'm still incredibly cocky, but anyway, I'm going off on a tangent here, but what I want to bring up here, which is interesting what you're talking about, is the first show that we played together was in this band Vox Populi, and it was like new metal-ish, borderline screamo kind of, right? Is that fair to say? There was no rapping or anything, you know, it was just like screaming and drop D.
It was the product of a couple of kids who listened to new metal and started the band a year later, yeah.
And I had such bad stage fright that when we finished, I quit the band on stage. I went up to Matt and the guitar player, and I just said, listen, man, I can't do this. This is too much. I was horrified the whole fucking time. And then, fast forward to now when I am king shit of turd world every time I step on the stage.
Well, I mean, don't. At least you're humble. I don't know, man. Yeah, that is very interesting that you. But that's what I'm saying. I'm baffled by that because yes, I remember I used to have a camcorder and I would like hand it off to our friend who would film our practices, and he would just pan around the room and just film all of us playing. And you know, this man I'm talking to, John, would face the other way while he was singing, like he wouldn't make eye contact. And he had the voice for it at the time. And I was just so baffled by that fact. And then cut to now. But where does that motivation come from? Like, what was there like a moment? Was it an evolution over time that you went from being so meek to being so bold?
I think what it came down to was like when I started playing music in general. So there was that period of time. And that was like the first stint I had in like quote unquote playing in a band. And then some time by, and then I started playing drums for you guys, and then it like turned into whatever other different bands it was at the time. But like the more and more I started playing music, even though I turned into like solely a drummer for many years after that, the way it made me feel really gave me my confidence. And fast forward to I played in a band called Rice Cultivation Society, the brainchild of Derek Smith, who would be great to talk to for this.
That
sure
yeah. Don't let too many cats out of the bag. But
whoops.
That's
we
okay.
can edit around that.
I'm not going to edit this. I'm tired.
But I remember it's actually weird because Mike Kennedy, who was playing bass at the time, just posted like a memory thing. It was 10 years ago, a couple of days ago, that we played our first like show together at a bar called Sinclair's in Westbury. And I remember being so fucking nervous. And like before that set, that was kind of like the last time that I've had like crippling nerves. Because, you know, it was like a first time really playing before. I think we did like an open mic before that as a fluke, but this was our first like booked show. And I was so fucking scared. And then as soon as we started playing, I felt like I just turned into a fucking dragon. And I felt like $1,000,000, and I was just beating the shit out of the drums. I bust my hands open, and like the drum set and my pants were covered in my blood. And I felt like a fucking eagle soaring. It was amazing. It was like ever since then, that was kind of like, oh, this is home. This is where I belong. This is where I'm safe, and this is where I can do anything I fucking want. So that kind of evolved over the years, and you know, several years later, when I joined up with Nick Lee and Ray Marte and Vin Romanelli as we were forming Moontooth, then I was the front man and the singer, and that was just like, by then I had like years of playing behind the kit in Rice had built up my confidence and like bravado to like when I jumped to the front of the stage, I was just like, oh yeah, I'm not afraid of you fuckers. Like, this is my room right now. Like I'm gonna own this fucking place. Kind of.
Yeah, and I want to say that
I think just come from playing.
Well, that's amazing because that's almost instantaneous. It's like you go from the moment of being scared to playing, and then suddenly feeling as if you have some sort of Excalibur, so to speak. Like you have something.
Yeah.
That nobody else has, and that's really wild. But I did. I'm sorry. I did want to say that you making mention of the guys and how you got involved with Moontooth, even in the way you became a part of that band, is somewhat historic. I mean, I know this wouldn't be the first time the story was told, but I'm pretty sure you wrote the guys and just said like, I am your man. Like there's something very, is that right?
So brief history, Nick Lee and Ray Marte played in a band called Exemption with Tom Moran. And they were a band for about 8 years or so. And they were just like the absolute fucking best. Like one of my favorite bands I will ever see play live, and I love their music. And they were a part of our scene. You know, they were like the shining pinnacle of our scene, really. And for the last probably I might be a little off with this time frame, but roughly for like the last year or so of Exemption, Nick played second guitar in Rice Cult with me and Derek and Joe Sanders at that point. So that's how I met Nick. We played a show with Exemption, and then Nick played in Rice for a while, and I loved Exemption. And then they broke the news that Tom was going to leave. Tom's a brilliant singer songwriter, and that was kind of more of the direction he was going. So he left. Tom was the bass player singer for Exemption. When he left, they made a in conversation, and I think publicly too, they said like we're definitely going to keep going with something else, And I just wrote Nick this long like message and just saying like talking about like my influence, what drives me, why I love what him and Ray were doing at the time, and and why I just kind of knew in my heart like I know I'm the guy for the job, and worded politely and without as much arrogance, but just basically saying like I know I got this, I know it's for me,
Right. Well, that is a perfect spot to land on sort of my next line of questioning, which has to do with your influences. And I know they change over time. So if I'm going to ask you about who your influences are, I know I'm going to hear something from when you were 6 years old, and I'm going to hear something from a year ago. Like I know that your influences are always moving around.
Yeah.
And I did tune into the Moontooth live story where you were doing a one-on-one Q&A type of thing, and you had made mention of some books to your audience, and you can bring those up if you want. I wrote down that you mentioned The Magician's Nephew by Joseph Campbell, and
Whoa, hold on, let's backtrack. It's The Magician's Nephew by C.S. Lewis.
Oh, okay.
It's
So
the one that I held up. It's a Narnia book. It's the one that everybody knows is Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
mm-hmm.
But The Magician's Nephew chronologically takes place the first in that 7-book series. But I was also talking about a bunch of Joseph Campbell books, nonfiction.
You know what? I wrote them on one line, so I was like, "Oh, The Magician's Nephew by Joseph Campbell."
Yeah.
I don't know enough about literature to correct it, so all you know.
No, nobody ever talks about The Magician's Nephew, so.
Oh, okay.
It sounds like it could be a Joseph Campbell book.
But when you bring up Joseph Campbell, something about the one thing I wrote down that you mentioned is that everyone is living their own hero myth.
Well, I think that is kind of like a lot of what was in my head and heart, probably like always, but especially like in the time of like starting Moontooth and when I, was like writing lyrics for songs that were going to reach other people. That was the whole thing. It was all about, this like call to adventure kind of thing. And I don't really remember when or how I got into Joseph Campbell, honestly. It was probably around then, but it's basically like his philosophy is all, about this idea of like mythology is just a mirror to every person and their own life, a person's life. There's these arcs and these kind of like archetypes that happen, and you go through these trials and you pass or you fail them. Sometimes maybe you like get this opportunity, maybe you ignore it, maybe the opportunity is knocking at first, and if you ignore it, it will fucking knock your door down, or maybe you don't ignore it, But I just love that because that's always kind of how I looked at life. I always I wanted more. I didn't have it in me to just fucking settle down and get a job that I didn't give a shit about, I remember before we kind of started playing music, I had this like vague idea, like maybe I'll go to college and be a history teacher. I think I would kind of like that, but I wasn't like, oh my God, I'm already a history teacher. I'm the history teacher. It wasn't anything like that.
Sure.
But it wasn't until I started playing music that I was like, oh my God, this is it. And it was like the bliss that Joseph Campbell talks, where he says, follow your bliss. And that's the kind of thing sometimes people, if they're lucky enough, I don't think lucky. I don't believe in luck really. I just think I think it's if people listen to themselves enough and learn enough about their own brain, their own heart, and their own spirit, then they'll hear that call to whatever bliss and they'll follow it. So that's what all those adventure myths are all about. They're all just metaphors for, a person's life, that when they're called to what their true calling is. But it that kind of ties into a lot of like what you're talking about with this podcast. It's this quest, this dangerous, mission to like go on this path of this unorthodox life, or unorthodox at first, but like really when you look at it, we're talking about having careers, people like you and I,
Sure.
but when you look at it, the specifics of it, and when we're younger and when getting out of college and high school, and our parents are expecting us to get like just full-time gigs wherever that has benefits, again, the very careful thing I'm going off on a tangent here, but another very careful line to stride is I think you talked about this in the first episode. It's not about like putting anyone down that wants to have a desk job or anything like that, of course.
Or certainly not for doing it out of absolute necessity. Survival is key, and I'm not here to judge you, and neither are you, and I know you that. I know that.
Yeah.
So
I'm talking about what I kind of rally for, and the people I kind of rant at and preach at are the people that like say you are working some desk job that you fucking hate, and you do have some kind of calling that that you were like born for, that makes you feel happy, and that if you really went for it and risked your neck, you could turn it into a career. Those are the people that I'm talking about. Those are like the people that hear the call to adventure, and so that's, I don't know. Joseph Campbell is like, if you're a budding artist, read Joseph Campbell. That shit will inspire you.
And you're talking about this call to adventure that he puts forth, and that sort of being applicable to one's life. When was would you say that time that you performed at Sinclair's, the first time you played drums with Derek in that example, was that, that wasn't the first call. Do you remember the first time you heard any call to it? Or
yeah. Dude, I can remember things throughout my whole life, even from when I was a little kid, of weird, and like, this is going to make some people close their ears, I know, but they were like, call them whatever you want to call them, but there were weird like synchronicities I can remember from being really little, where I would be like in the back seat of my car listening to, something, and there'd be weird, like the lyrics of whatever song I was listening to was like basically saying what I was doing exactly. Not even like, like weird shit like that. I'm just like, what was that? That was weird. And like noticing, it's this weird kind of moment where like something strange happens and make you focus on this one thing, but it always involved music. There were, times where like I remember one time I sat behind a piano in the Cub Scouts when I was in fucking probably third grade or something like that, and it was a piano in the cafeteria when the meeting was over, and I was just bashing away on the piano, and it sounded like garbage, I'm sure, but at the time I was like, it sounds amazing, and I'm a master of piano. This is the best. I don't need anything else ever. This sounds great, And first time I sat down behind a drum kit, like at like a friend's, like older brother's. It was actually Larry Bernardo's drum kit, which is funny because like I'm involved with certain projects with him now. But yeah, I was friends with his little sister Jenna. We were in his basement. I sat down behind his kit, and there was just like something that like, it's hard to describe, but like you felt something in you where all your attention and all of your focus and everything in your brain, all the strands all went to one thing, and just like something grabbed you and said like, hey, dipshit, pay attention to this, like, and I never got that really with anything else. But as time went by and I started playing music more, then it really, started. That's the thing about like, going back to Joseph Campbell, like another part on that like hero map, if you want to call it that, is like, once the person opens that door or answers that call, while there will be obstacles and trials and whatnot, there will be help. More doors will open, So a lot of times the scariest thing is like just making the first choice to pursue this stuff, and it's horrifying, rightfully so. But once you do, doors that you couldn't have imagined will definitely open up. And then it's not about like, I need to know where every door is and I need to check them and make sure they're unlocked. It's not about that. It's just like, if you see one door, go through that fucking door. Eventually the next door will pop
I have
up,
to pause you here because so far in this whole conversation, I want to talk about weird synchronicity things. You have specifically brought up two things or three things in this conversation to this point that I did in the recorded intro that I did for this episode before I spoke to you. So,
oh, really?
Yes, specifically finding all these doors and things like that. And to me, that's very interesting that you gravitated towards the same metaphor. And I
told you.
Yeah, and there's some sort of thing that like points me to say, this is what you're supposed to be doing right now. And not to go too off on myself, because I know, but as you say, all these doors that point to you and these synchronicities and things like that. And there are plenty of other things around us that are telling us not to do these things. And sometimes those are not to be ignored. Those things are there for a reason too, but I do find it very interesting in that particular example, because I mean, if I were to apply this, listening to this loud voice of hey, you dipshit, this, if I'm applying that to my life, me seeing the synchronicity in what you're saying, talking to me, for example, I'm seeing that maybe I am supposed to be doing this, and I don't know why I'm supposed to be talking about being creative with you. But I'm supposed to be for whatever reason, and I have to trust that. And did you always trust your intuition? Or did you go through moments of doubt? Did you go through moments where you felt it was wrong to follow that voice?
It's foggy. Everything's kind of foggy when you look back a little bit. But for the most part, I did always trust it. But to more severe degrees as time went by. Like, I can remember playing drums, like when I had like first learned how to play drums. I learned how to play drums because like you guys like called me up and said Brian, our good friend Brian, who was a brilliant drummer, like he was too busy. So like, Brian's too busy, learn how to play drums. And I learned how to play drums just from like basically learning how to rub my belly and pat my head and like just figure my limbs out. And then I learned drums by just jamming with you guys. But from those early days, like, it's funny because like I knew so little, but the way it made me feel made me so fucking sure. I can remember in those early days thinking like, I could make a career out of this, which is hilarious now to think about, because like talking about a time where like barely had a band, you know what I mean? It was just like garbage music or this and that. And like, but that feeling was just like, oh, this will work, The trust was always there. It wasn't till it got to the point where I was like basically flunking out of college because I just stopped doing the work. I stopped going. I just didn't give a shit about going. So I just kind of dropped out. That was like the hardest time in terms of the pressure to not. Even at that time, like there wasn't a set game plan like there is now. I don't want to say I wasn't afraid, but like I wasn't as concerned with as you might think someone would be, just because. All right, I'm rambling a lot, but the point I want to make is like, because of the way it made me feel, that's how I trusted in it. Like, think of a relationship. When two people are in love, I always kind of thought that like when you're really truly in love with someone, that love is the thing that tells you like we can make it through anything because we love each other, And that's kind of what I felt about this stuff. Like, oh, it doesn't matter if I don't know how this is going to work, or I don't know exactly what I'm going to do, but I know that I know that I've tapped into like some kind of fucking current. Like the lightning has found its lightning rod, so that's all I need. So that kind of like that kept my attitude pretty sure from the get-go, I would say.
I've never really heard anyone compare it to romance in that way. That's very interesting. It's pretty astounding. That said, I mean, whatever you're doing seems to be working for you, because there is, going from where you've gone from to where you are now. And I know there's many more mountains to climb for you, and I know,
oh yeah,
I know you ain't done, but with that in mind, I am curious about. Okay, you're in a position now where there is an expectation of some sort of, in the design world you call them deliverables, but there's output. There's the expectation of output, and I'm curious in more ways than one, or in relation to multiple projects. So, how does your process work as far as writing and you know, I'm gonna say with you, I'm gonna say the word summoning words. I feel like that's more appropriate for you, knowing you.
Yep.
But how does that play in when you're writing for Moontooth, which, you know, at this point is an act with, you know, national recognition, if not worldwide recognition in some respects, and making lyrics that work for that project versus maybe the lyrical content of something you do for something more personal and intimate. Like for those that don't know, John had a variety of products. He used to play in a band called his musical project was Son of Brennick, and that was a live band, and I did play in that for a time, and then that eventually morphed into, I believe, Sun Cole, which was your solo venture. Is there a difference in your process depending on which voice you're taking on? And are they the same voice or are they different? And do the processes reflect that in any way?
So I used to think of it like the music that I wrote on my own was like my journal, and the music that I wrote with Moontooth was like my manifesto, you know, where in the earlier years it was much more like the first EP and album that Moontooth made. It was much more general ideas, not so focused on my own personal life, but translated into a very general way, you know, about dealing with certain concepts. And the first album, it was all about that call to adventure shit and having the courage to, you know, go on that. And the second album, full length, we made called Crux, our more recent one, was a lot it was a lot more personal for me. That was lyrically, I got more personally involved. And the new songs that we've been writing now and since Cruxes came out have definitely even further blurred the lines of me being personal and me being general. So I don't know, you know, it's like, it's interesting. It's definitely my own stuff. I have like an album's worth of songs that probably won't even be called Sun Cole at this point because there's too many Sun bands. There's like Sun Vault, Sun Little, so that's fucking over with. But that stuff, it's like, it's definitely much more like personally referencing than the Moontooth stuff. Although with Moontooth stuff, I've definitely got a lot more personal. But the whole idea to me is like, you know, I called Moontooth like the manifesto because, you know, I knew from the get-go that we meant business and we were going to, you know, fucking fight our way to the top, meaning like a lot of people would hear us. So it's like, all right, if a lot of people are hear us, what do I want to say? And like, basically, I want to help people. So I want to, you know, I want to encourage people. I want to tell people about the times that I am not feeling encouraged, so they can maybe feel some kind of kinship with me if they feel lost or something like that. And then as time has gone on, you know, I talk about my own heartbreaks and troubles in a general way to have people relate. But yeah, as time has gone by, the lines have definitely blurred more in terms of me including very personal and specific things with Moontooth lyrics.
Sure. The reason I ask that question that way at all and try to draw a distinction is because I know that a lot of people that will likely find their way to this podcast are fans of Moontooth, as am I. And I also am a fan of your other projects as well. And I also know that you, as an individual, are incredibly multifaceted. So there's not one particular thing that you do, and you are that thing. I feel that for some people, they are this one entity. This is their one channel. This is their one angle. But I know you to be a lot more than that. I know that you've also have had and continue to have forays into acting and comedy. And I know that you write in a literary sense as well as like a lyrical sense. Not to say that the two are not one and the same, but I've known you to have your hands in so many different things. You cover a lot of different moods. I think you can write for a band like Moontooth and have this great weight and gravity, and I feel like you've got a hammer in your hand and you're smashing it on the table and you're riling the audience up, and it's a power. And then I see your individuals solo projects, as you're holding your heart in your hands, and it's very vulnerable. And I do see how there is a melding of the two in Moontooth these days. I do see that the two are sort of melding together in that respect. But I also know that there's this insanely goofy human being. We used to do, we did the Centerville Present sketches, and when we did the parties as Centerville as an entity. And
I think you misspoke. It's Centerville Presence.
This has been the debate since we've my pitch was you call the show Centerville Presents, and then that was just whatever the sketch was, and John has insisted on calling it Centerville Presents, and neither one is wrong.
Present. It's a present for you.
I mean, it's not wrong, but to speak to that point, no, don't be sorry. But to speak to that point, yeah, do you ever personally feel, and I feel this way, so maybe I'm projecting, but do you ever feel that as a creative person that there is this pressure to perhaps only wear one of your masks, and that you maybe stray away from bringing a part of your personality to the forefront in a certain setting?
I wouldn't say there's a pressure. I would say there's a desire to do that.
Why is that?
Because I think, you and our close friends and my family, definitely know me as somebody who's absolutely a jokester. And one of the, the things I'm grateful to have in me is the ability to make the people I love laugh, and I love being, able to do that and just be a kind of source of positivity for the people that I love. And a lot of that means being just really goofy and silly, and it's fun, and so because of that, sometimes, there are certain people where that's most of what they will see. There's certain family members I have will that's most of what they will see, but there's so much else going on underneath, you know what I mean? A lot of that stuff, I'll make myself laugh, sure, but a lot of that stuff will come up because you want to make other people's happy, or you want to help make other people happy. You want to help other people when they're in a rut, and you want to just get them laughing and ease their tension. But then, you're alone, and, you have a tension of your own, and, so that's why when I'm writing songs, that's my place where all right, I mean, sometimes in Moontooth, there's times for silliness. It's just but a lot of times that's my spot where I would be all right, this is my chance to not be silly. This is where I want to be serious, and I want to try to explain a little bit of what's going on and what's fucking torturing me in my head, what's really not funny, so it's a natural thing that, earlier in the Moontooth days, there was a lot more kind of whimsical stuff, and time goes by, you get older, you get a little grumpier, you go through some shit, and you get worn down a little bit. So yeah, I think when I want to be funny, I want to be funny, but there's a lot of seriousness that I'm desperate to, I guess, get out there or be understood. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't know if you've ever had this where maybe you write a song or you make some kind of piece of art and you want your close friends, you make something and you want, and it's serious and maybe it's dark, and you want desperately for them to see it and understand it, or listen to it and understand it, because it's just look, I kind of I need this to be known about me. You know what I mean? Because I'm kind of hurting. And please, just please understand this, So that's usually the voice when it comes to music, the silliness. Luck, thank God, has a lot of other outlets in my life. So it's definitely not a pressure. To answer your question, it's a strong desire to separate, but not keep. It's not a law, you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be separate,
Sure. That's very interesting. I mean, knowing how much of your life Moontooth can consume, and wondering if you ever feel, that you are being put in a box. And in some weird way, it sounds to me like not only are you enjoying the box, but you've got other boxes and you're happy to bounce around between them. And it seems like you're doing it with some serious agility. It does seem like you can sort of put on the voice you want to put on when you want to put it on, and I don't know. I personally do struggle with that too. I know that my artwork can go from very heavy. This is not a brag, but rather a fact. I've done artwork for you guys, and the artwork for the album Crux is meant to have some gravity and weight to it, and it's meant to convey a certain message. But I can do a poster for like a later leg of the tour, and it's got a gummy bear with a knife through it, and it's So I do think there's an interesting dichotomy there as far as Moontooth goes, and the band goes. So it doesn't seem that the band is we only wear black and we only cry, and that's never been so thankfully you do have that going, but there is some sort of expectation I find of the audience, perhaps, that this is not to speak ill of them, but rather I feel like there is this sort of generalization about what metal is and what the rules are. And I do wonder, I guess my question was to sort of see if you struggled with that. And from what you just said, it doesn't sound like you do. It sounds like you quite enjoy it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely, I mean, the one thing, like, in terms of Moontooth, like, we were never just a metal band from the start, although we're in the metal world. And, when you're coming up, you've got to, it's not that you have to, but you're going to be lumped into a genre, or, and you're going to be put on certain bills with bands, and, like, you're going to be put into a group, and that's, it just is what it is. You have to take part in your community, whatever it is. And, like, Moontooth was never going to be playing the indie rock shows in Brooklyn. We were going to be playing at St. Vitus, But when you look closer at us, there's, it's like, oh, well, I guess they're heavy as fuck, but I guess they're not exactly metal, though. There's no screaming and this and that. And I'm going off on a tangent here.
That's totally fine. That's what this all is, man. I'm not really too worried about going off on tangents. I'm just sort of hoping that if somebody is listening to this and actually enjoying it, if they're patient, that patience can be rewarded, and maybe a couple of nuggets fall out of the bottom of this thing. Yeah. And, maybe somebody walks away like slightly more motivated or slightly more inclined to go make something of their own. While I bring that up, you do actively pursue this. This is, something that you have allocated your life to, is being a creative. And I know that that's not always paying. And I think perhaps maybe there's a misconception about what happens to the singer of the band when his song goes on the radio. Do you feel comfortable discussing perhaps what happens, like what your work life and your money life and maybe, I don't know if you feel comfortable having a discussion about.
Sure. Yeah. Well, there's this interesting a good way to frame this is conversations I've had with my parents, both together and separately. I've had a good upbringing. My family's always been really tight. My parents have been very supportive. However, I have one cousin who's been in bands. My cousin Jonathan, who was in a band called Harold's Trousers when we were younger. That's kind of it for like my cousins and family and stuff in terms of people in bands. So as time was going by and I was getting involved in this stuff, naturally, of course, and this ties into other things we were talking about like kind of roadblocks coming up. A lot of time those roadblocks are going to come from the people that love you, because they're like, what the fuck are you doing? I don't understand this. That sounds dangerous as fuck. Don't do that. Just go fucking get a job at fucking the dentist office or something, So a lot of the conversations with my parents, like as, earlier on, I would frame it in this way of like, look, they would start to see that like, okay, he's starting to get paychecks from this shit. He's coming home from tour with some money. Now he's starting to make some money from royalties, like random checks that will come through. And I try to tell them that like this kind of day job / passion work pay balance, it's almost like God, it's difficult, like being an Italian man and doing this without my hands being visible, but it's like two thermometers, right? And the day job one is totally full to the top, and then the passion project that you're trying to make the career is at the bottom. And as you're working your ass off over years, those levels are shifting. The day job income's going down because you're, or at least in terms of being in a band, because you're making less money because one, you can't hold a steady job because of touring all the time, or even if, I'm very grateful for the job that I've had, that they understand the touring thing, and I'm able to leave and come back. I don't get paid when I'm gone, obviously, but they allow me to come back, Um, but I'm losing money from that. But it's as time has gone on, we finally started making money off of these tours. So you start making money off of the tours, then you start getting a little bit bigger. You start getting money from royalties. Those checks get bigger, and like as you're quote unquote making it, like I will look at a band here on the radio, and they'll be getting a lot of plays and like saying like, oh yeah, they're playing a 1,500 cap room or something like that, and I think like, oh man, they're made in the shade, and like probably not. Those guys are probably still have cafe jobs or like waiter jobs or coffee shop jobs when they come home from tour.
And how does that apply to you? Like where are you in that spectrum? Are you still holding down a regular job?
Yeah, when I'm home, I work at a museum/nature preserve, and the people that work there and my boss, they're wonderful people, and they knew me before I started working there. They knew me a little bit, and they knew I did the band stuff and touring. And I basically, when I started the job, I said, look, I'm going to be gone more frequently and for longer periods of time as time goes by. If you're cool with me still working here, and they were basically just like, yeah, as long as you give us notice, and now it's at the point where it's really like a kind of family situation there, and it's definitely not convenient when I leave, but I give them enough notice, and I bust my fucking ass when I am there. So I'm able to come back and still work. For a while, it was like when I would leave and miss those hours on work, we wouldn't be making money off of those tours. We'd be making barely enough money to like come home broke, to like actually do the tour. And then just struggle for a while, and then as years went on, the stores started kind of breaking even a little bit, and then as years went on, it got to the point where like the band started making money, and then it got to the point when like each of us personally started, like the band makes money, and then each of us personally can take home a couple $100 in our pockets, and then it got to the point where like money each of us personally are taking home is enough to supplement the money we lost from our day jobs while we were gone, and we're just like a little bit past that now. Now we're at the point where we're getting some royalties too, so those checks have come in handy. Like I think something worth noting is that the fact that we're talking about this in the middle of the fucking coronavirus pandemic, where everybody's like laid off from work. I haven't been at work in like over 2 weeks now, and I don't know when they're gonna call us to go back, but I've had 2 royalty checks since this happened that have saved my fucking ass,
That's amazing.
So it's this kind of thing where like the further along you get, this has been a lot of explaining to kind of explain this concept. What I told to my parents in different conversations was like, as we get more successful, it's going to get more difficult to survive because you're making less money from your day job, and you have to kind of pass that midpoint, and eventually to get to the point where the thermometer, the side of the passion, is all the way to the top, and you're making all your money from that, and you don't even have a day job, quote unquote thing. So
Sure.
That's been a difficult thing to navigate.
It seems like you have. I mean, and again, as I said before, many more mountains. They're not out of the woods yet, but yeah. I mean, it does sound like that helped you out in a pinch, which is amazing that you guys are able to pull it off.
Something I have to mention. My job at the museum, the preserve, is like, I feel like it's a rare kind of thing for people like you and I to the consistency of something like that to come back to is rare. Like normally a lot, like my drummer owns a studio, and my guitar player and my bassist have done kind of odds and ends here and there. Most of the time people are doing kind of odds and ends things, and I'm incredibly grateful to have had this steady thing that I can come back to. So it's been helpful. It has, it doesn't mean it's been easy, but at the very least, like I've had it definitely easier than a person might necessarily have, which is why I stay living where I'm living, because I'm near the job, and I know that like I want to move. I don't want to live where I'm living now, but I know I'm not going to find another day job that is this tolerant of what I do. So I'm going to just wait until I don't need a day job to move, basically.
Well, what I'm going to say to the listener, and in turn, I guess I'm saying it to you too. Like, if you could do it, somebody else could do it too. Not to say that it's easy, but the fact that there are people out there that are willing to be flexible, and if you provide them the right amount of work ethic, they might perhaps be willing to take care of you and support you, and allow you to go and pursue that thing you need to pursue. It is unlikely, you're right, but it doesn't. By virtue of the fact that you have it, it is not impossible, and maybe that is something that somebody should strive for.
Can I interject with something here? This kind of ties into what we were talking about before. Again, somebody listening to this could they could take what they want from this, but this does tie into the kind of the doors that will open. I am living proof of this. Since I've started doing this stuff, that's what my life has been. My dad says this thing about me sometimes, which is really funny, and it's true. I had a lot of bones thrown my way. My dad says that he's like, sometimes I feel like there's boulders falling from the sky everywhere, and you're just strolling around absentmindedly, and none of the boulders hit you. And there have been so many times where things have just lined up so well for me, and that has happened mostly pretty much only when I've been following my path, my call. You know what I mean? The times, where I wasn't, in a place where I knew I belonged in my heart, my soul, shit wasn't working out. Life was bad,
Right.
And then, but once I started kind of making those choices to follow that path, that's when those doors started opening. That's when those random chances happened. So I don't me having this kind of job now that enables me to leave and, takes me back, allows me to go for a while and then allows me to come back. I think that's a perfect example of just that's one of those, going back to Joseph Campbell, there's when the hero goes on his or her adventure, she will always have help. There's always help given to the hero, and my life's living proof of that, man. I got a lot of good situations that work out pretty good, and I 100% believe, take this for whatever the fuck you want, but I 100% I know that the situations in my life are there because they're enabling me to do the thing that I was born to do. So a little metaphysical if you want to say it, but it also is the truth of what's happening in my life. So
I didn't say anything because I was smiling so big. That was awesome. I was going to find my way into the last sort of section I wanted to touch on, which was, do you have any advice, which sort of comes with the bullet points of, I'd like to hear some of your successes versus your failures. And if you have any recommendations for, any tricks, any tools, any just noteworthy insight. I do want to say that's a beautiful piece of advice, that the hero will always have help. Or how did you phrase that?
Yeah, there will always be help given to the hero. There's always some kind of guru, or there's always some kind of, they call it divine help.
Yeah.
In real life, it's in the form of just holy shit, that job situation worked out really good. He's able to go on tour and come back to a paycheck. Granted, it takes a while for him to work enough, a couple weeks to build his paychecks up, but doesn't mean it's easy, but it's at least it's fucking there,
I would say, if you were to approach that in a pragmatic way, if I'm interpreting that, it's your life makes room for the life you want.
Yeah.
If you're carving out this path for yourself and you're going out there and doing it, your life has no choice but to adjust to it. So help will be there because
something
it has
happens.
to be.
Something really does happen. You listen to anybody that fucking made it, and most of the time weird shit starts to happen and doors start to open. It's true, man. But you were asking about successes and failures.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like a solid question. It literally, on my notes, it says successes versus failures. So I suppose, I guess if I was going to ask it in the form of a question, it seems as if by virtue of the fact that you've been on this path and you have continued to gain a certain level of momentum, and you have continued to walk around with falling boulders as per your dad, which, by the way, is really funny because I love your dad, and Mr. Carbone has the most deadpan delivery of any human being I've ever met. So I'm loving the visual. But, that said, it seems that when you are doing things that bring you success, you are doing it almost in the face of ignorance is the wrong word, but you're walking around with like sort of a blind eye to all of the things that could be going wrong, and by virtue of doing that, you're having all that success. But I'm happy to hear, like, when I say the phrase successes versus failures, does anything come to mind? Is it like there's one instance versus another, or could you say?
You said something very interesting to me. You talked about this idea of like maybe acting almost like in ignorance, like this kind of like blind, leap forward kind of thing. And as soon as you started talking about it, I started thinking about like the tarot deck, the Fool card. It's the 0 card. It's like at the very beginning. And it's the depiction of somebody basically dressed like a jester, more or less, who's got like a bundle on their back, and they're wistfully, not looking where they're stepping, and they're basically about to walk off a cliff, and there's like a happy puppy just kind of jumping along. It's a powerful card because it describes this kind of like total innocence and, maybe ignorance, but like, the power of like a child and their innocent ideas is that they don't think of, well, I can't do this. Like a toddler or something is just this boundless potential, this blind kind of like, let's go for it kind of thing, which is what is necessary for an artist to take that blind leap forward. And that's been a huge part of everything I've done personally. And I think any artist really does, because like you could call it a risk if you're certain in yourself and your abilities, and if you tell yourself like, we're gonna fucking win, we're gonna do whatever it takes to fucking win, but like, it's a risk. You don't know what's gonna happen, but it's all about that thing. Like, I am throwing myself to the winds here because this is innocent and this is pure what I'm feeling, and I trust in that, and I'm gonna walk blindly off a cliff and then I'm gonna fly, basically. Going through this, there are so many levels of like successes and failures, like every kind of step you go. Like, I can definitely talk specifically about, in the music industry and being like a DIY band and like trying to take a DIY band to the next level.
Sure, you could do that. It's
really relatable to, in any, I'm sure you can relate to the same things. Like, you get a breakthrough, it's like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, or 3 steps forward, 1 step back, or, it's not the same every time, but there's always, like, however far you make, there's always something that like will knock you on your ass. Like, oh, this is great, oh, this is great, we're doing great, and then blam, you just get knocked on your fucking ass. And it always happens, and it's going to keep happening, and that's really a good thing, because you get better from getting knocked down like that. That's where you learn what works and what doesn't. That's where you learn who you are. That's what separates the people who really want to do this stuff and who really don't. Because if you don't want to do it, it's not going to work,
Yeah.
I don't know. There's this kind of like a bullheaded idea that I had that, maybe there are specific cases to, but sometimes I think like if it didn't happen, you didn't want it bad enough. It doesn't necessarily mean that you didn't try hard enough, but it means that like you as a person in your soul, you weren't craving enough for that to happen. So you just didn't, I don't know, something didn't click, but I don't know. That's an arrogant kind of thing to say, but
I don't want to, I can see why you would take that sentence and think somebody might think that, but I do want to kind of buffer that. And I want to say, by not wanting it bad enough, there is something to that. Now, I know you as, as long as I have, and you did not always, and I'm just using singing because that's, again, what people here are going to know. You as a singer you've made yourself that singer. You were not like a naturally gifted singer that like showed up on American Idol at age 9 and got like, you know, the
Yeah.
the golden judge or whatever. That's not who you were initially. I mean, that literally was you sitting in a studio hours on end, repeatedly pushing your body to a point that it was never going to go on its own. So when you say want bad enough, I'm not hearing, well, you know, you didn't wish it into the world enough. I'm hearing you didn't push yourself hard enough into doing the thing as well as you could have, and part of that is to do with your ability to accurately assess yourself and remind yourself, at least in my opinion, that all right, I got a lot more to do. I'm not done growing yet. I'm not exactly where I need to be.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. There's, it's interesting that you raised that point. Like whatever my vocal ability is now in 2020, not anywhere near where it was when I started with Moontooth, or like even before that. And the physical way that my voice and my body changed is a good example of pushing forward. What before Moontooth, like, I sang in the songs that I wrote on my own, just like in a solo way, but it was much different. It was much softer. And like I joined Moontooth, and like they're coming through with these powerful, fucking huge ass, just like bullhorn on fucking DMT, like kind of levels.
That's the name of this episode. So that
demanded, bullhorns on DMT.
Yeah.
Like, it demanded a voice that belted and stuff like that. So I would hear these things in my head, and I would write things that I couldn't play. And that's, I think, something that people hear a lot, is that, like, just write something. If you're a musician or something, or even an artist, like, think of something you can't do, and then work on it until you can do it. And then you will have raised your plateau of ability. And it's all about, like, those plateaus, they just keep getting raised and raised and raised. Like, I can remember, like, the first recordings Moontooth did, and like the first EP, of like whatever point on that EP was just like, oh yeah, that was highest my voice, like the highest register, the most I could push my voice was at that point. I can't believe I did that. You fast forward to the next album, the first full length, and I went miles beyond that. And like there were points on that first album that was like, oh my god, that was like, I barely got it out. My muscles, my body, my throat was, my lungs were, vocal cords barely able to hit those notes or this and that. And then you fast forward years of touring on those songs and singing them over and over again, and you work and you stretch your body, and then like along the next album, that like highest point on the last album was just like, oh fuck, I can go miles beyond that now. And like it's just been that over and over and over again. And like, I didn't anticipate being someone who belts notes out or this and that. And like this whole endeavor has shaped my voice, and I think it's a really good metaphor for the whole process of going for something. Is just like, if you can't do something, just fucking do it anyway, because you will be able to do it. If you just do it, you'll be able to do it. It sounds like it doesn't make sense, but I swear it does,
Yeah. I think the people who want to be pursuing that thing, whatever that thing is for them, are gonna hear that and know exactly what you mean. And the people who have had successes in that respect also know exactly what you're talking about. You don't know if you don't know, and if you don't know, now you know. So I mean, yeah, man, I got nothing else really to say. I mean, you've spoken quite eloquently about this, and some of this is just it's eye-opening to me. I learned a lot here. I don't know. Is there anything in particular you want to address or say? Is there anything that you might want to share, or you? Because I think we're kind of wrapping up at this point.
Kind of just to sum up, and it's more or less everything I've been saying. It's just like, I think it's cool that you're doing this, and it's helpful to artists of all kinds to be able to like find kinship with people, not only heroes who have made it, but people who are in the same trenches that you are, you know what I mean? And like, and people who, maybe, I don't know, who have, especially people who have not quote unquote made it, you know, like first of all, like there's no, the line of like making it and not making it, it's not so specific a line. It's very blurry, and there's a lot of like in between involved, but it all comes down to the fact that like if you want it, you can get it. If you have some kind of truth in you, if you're honest and not a piece of shit, you'll get there. You will fucking get there. You know what I mean? If you're not really pouring your heart and soul into this, and you're not making the sacrifices to make it happen, because it's just gonna be uncomfortable, you know, you have to deal with it. But it goes back to what we're talking about with those failures. Like every one of those failures, and not only failures, but like discomforts, it's all going to separate the people who make it from the people who don't, you know?
Oh, discomforts is a huge part of it, and that's a thing. I mean, the amount of like English muffin pizzas and ramen bowls you're going to eat, I mean, there is no
Yeah.
I mean, I've lost count, but it's discomfort is huge. I mean, that's people are afraid to be uncomfortable, and so it suddenly is too hard. It's not that it is inherently hard. It's that you're just incredibly difficult to face change. You know, it's hard for you to.
Yeah, there'll be financial discomforts. There'll be physical discomforts. And the big thing will just be like life discomforts. Like, you know, I'm 32, and a lot of people I know are like getting married and things like that. And like I'm single now, and my last serious relationship ended pretty much because of this. You know, like me going after this, like. The glory will be evenly balanced by the inglorious.
Yeah. Oh my God. Oh, this hurts. This hurts.
Absolutely, you know.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to you know, if you're true and if you really want it, then all those hardships, it'll be worth it. You know, when you get those victories, those many different victories of many different levels, every one of those victories, once you get there and you feel that and you taste it, you'll be like, fuck yeah, this is worth all the discomfort. You know, I'm where I belong. I'm home, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Victory is relative. Success is relative. I mean, really, are you able to do this another day? Could be enough, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
It's not so black and white.
Yeah. It's, I think what you described, earlier, as you're talking about slowly working your way up and things slowly turning your direction and things kind of happening gradually, is a little bit more of a realistic expectation of what somebody can expect when they put the effort in. And I appreciate you opening up about that, because I know not a lot of people are willing to.
Yeah, I really want. And the last thing I will say is just like, I think about like Muhammad Ali as like, you know, an example, like the idea of Muhammad Ali, like, you know, if you got family pressuring you to get a day job, think about Muhammad Ali. You think he listened to family pressuring him about getting a day job? Or if that he wasn't happy, you think he was going to listen to them? Like, you got like a significant other who like doesn't want to hear it, and you know, like, that's the greats got there by sticking with it. So that's all it comes down to, is just that, like, if you need to do it, you will do it. Don't listen to anything else.
John, I just want to let you know, this is another, this is the perfect thing to close on. Another example of that weird kismet I was talking about before, you mentioning something. When I described you in the intro, I said you have an unparalleled stick-to-itiveness. And you rolled it up in a ball there. That was amazing, John. Thank you.
There you go.
Oh wow. Oh, John, thanks, man. This has been a blast.
This is great, Paul. I'm glad you're doing this, man.
Oh, dude. I mean, it's you're making it easy. Getting to, you know, this is fun. I'm looking forward to it. You know, and just to be a little bit transparent, you know, this whole situation right now that we're all dealing with COVID, and, you know, it being cooped up, it's difficult. You know, you're alone, you're isolated, your energy levels go down, your passion goes down, your wills go down. And the reason this exists is because, frankly, I'm looking for a reason to keep going. And talking to you, John, I have a fire in my belly I haven't had in what feels like a millennia. So thanks for
That's great. Me too. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right, man. I'll talk to you later. Have a good night, all right?
All right, peace.
Later.
Bye.
All right, guys, that's the whole thing. I want to wrap this up real quick. I want to say thank you to John and Nick and Vin and Ray from Moontooth for everything. Thanks to John for his time, and thanks to the band for letting me use the music on the intro and outro here. Make sure you follow them on Instagram at Moontooth Shreds. Album, merch, and tour dates, all that at moontooth.org. And keep up with them on their stories on Instagram and stuff, because I know they're staying active and engaged during this whole thing. And speaking of, I want to say thanks to my girlfriend for letting me run this off of her kitchen table during this pandemic, because this whole thing is pretty bleak, and this makes it a little bit better. If you want to follow me, you can follow me. I just created an Instagram account. It's Death Before Desk Job. That's pretty easy to remember. And sharing the podcast. It's available on Spotify and a couple of other places. Sharing and subscribing and all of that really helps. One last thing for you guys. When John and I got done on the call, he did mention that there was a thing he wanted to work into the process section, but we didn't get a chance to. And so once the interview was over, he mentioned this to me, and I accidentally kept the whole thing rolling. So I was able to catch it and work it in at the end. So it's a little treat for those of you who made it to the hour 16 mark. That's it for me. I'm out. Thanks so much. Stay safe.
Today, I woke up, in middle of pandemic land. I've also been self-isolating because I felt like a little feverish 2 weeks ago, and I turned into a sore throat, and I went through a cycle over the course of a few days. So I've just been playing it safe and self-isolating. I've been fine, but it's also been driving me fucking crazy.
Yeah.
And so I woke up today and just kind of puttered about, made some breakfast, and then was doing whatever, and then just took a fucking nap because I was tired for no reason. And woke up at almost 4 o'clock to a bunch of text messages, the band feed, and Nick had put this demo in this guitar, basically structured song, just guitar. And I've had these vocal ideas that I've had in my head the past couple of days, and I need the right song to come along for. None of the stuff that we have so far is right. And I heard that in my boxers as I'm listening to it, waking up from a nap. And I jolted up and oh fuck! And immediately I got it. I just threw my clothes on, and then I went in my car, and I drove to the beach, and I parked in an empty parking lot, and just sat in my car and wrote and recorded this whole fucking thing. It just it was totally magic that came along. I was gonna say if there were so many points to make, and I I forgot about that. But it was funny just because the day that we're recording this was on that.